Well, everyone, it is time to go ahead and compare iMessages and Google Messages, the applications, and see which specific one is the better one. Now, I'm going to definitely tell you both of these have large communities behind them, and they are very, very important. And to be honest, I don't necessarily think there's a winner here. I think both of them have their pros and their cons, and I do think when it comes down to it, if you have an Android, you only have, Google Messages. I mean, you have like Samsung Messages and some other, applications you can use. But if you have an iPhone, your main app is iMessage. And I feel like Google Message is the closest thing we have to an iMessage alternative on Androids. But majority of people out there end up using applications like Messenger or WhatsApp or even like Snapchat to kind of talk nowadays. So I feel like these messaging apps aren't as crazy competitive as they used to be, but they are still one of the main applications used on most other devices out there, which is so crazy to think. Now, starting off, I will tell you the raw functionality between these two are almost identical. You can send text messages, you can send SMS, so many different messaging formats on both Google Messages and iMessage as well. But one thing that's always been kind of competitive between these two is communication between them. When you're sending a text from an iPhone to an iPhone, if they have iMessage enabled, they'll actually be able to see blue messages and they'll basically be able to get a little bit more feature-full experience from an iPhone to an iPhone. And kind of the same thing between an Android and an Android. When you have Google Messages on both Androids, there's some features that kind of, go hand in hand there as well. It's only between when you go from iPhone to Android, that's when things start to get a little bit more different, I would say. But you have to also remember that even though iMessage seems to be like this thing that Android features, that Android devices want and all this, you still have the ability of turning off iMessage and just using, standard text messaging from your iPhone as well. But iMessage is an awesome ecosystem just like Google Messages. Now, some of the same functionality are between both of them, so you can go ahead and send and receive messages over Wi-Fi or data on Google Messages and on iMessage as well. That is easily one of my favorite features between them. But also you can go ahead and send images, videos, so many other informations like that between both as well. And although I will say I'm more used to iMessage, I kind of do like Google Messages UI. I feel like this has been a little bit more of a different design than iMessage. I'm just so used to iMessage the way it looks. And now that Apple is starting to go ahead and kind of make a few more changes, I said with iOS 15, Apple did make some few changes by changing the UI a little bit, giving us a little bit newer design up top, and also changing how images are shown. I think that's really cool. I will say with Google Messages, I kind of like that UI a little bit more, but they both have their pros and cons for sure. Now, you also have the ability of, reacting to certain chats within Google Messages as well now, so that's really cool. And within Google Messages, you do have Google Assistant, which is really cool, and you have that built in right there as well. But I do feel like with iMessages, when it comes down to contacting other people, I feel like things just flow a little bit better. So with iMessage, for example, if I wanted to go ahead and react to a message, I hold it down and I can send a message right there. And I feel like it's a little bit more stable. And what I mean by that is if a text message doesn't send or if something, doesn't work that well, I always feel like I can go ahead and fix it. And I always feel like there's always a way to fix it in that standpoint. On Google Messages, sometimes I feel like I'll send a message and I'll go around my day and I'll have to kind of check back on that message to see if it actually sent. And it's happened a few times. And that was one thing that kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. It's not an everyday occurrence, but there were a few times like that happened. And I also do feel like the community behind iMessage is a little bit more vast. I feel like if I wanted to go ahead and get multiple people in a group chat and they all have iPhones, things just flow a lot better. And I feel like if you have people, if you're messaging with Androids, it's a little bit more complicated to go ahead and, send certain bigger files. Although most of the time they send, if it's a massive file, sometimes I'll have to send it on Google Drive and then share them a link. And another thing is actually with games, with, Game Pigeon and a lot of other systems like that, being able to go ahead and send a game to another iPhone, through iMessage is actually really fun. And on Androids, I'm sure there's some alternatives, which I've talked about on my second channel a lot, but it's not quite at the level that it is with iMessage. So I feel like that's another thing to keep in mind. So those are just the main things right out the gate that I could see that were big differences, at least for my day-to-day usage. It's still things like iMessage and FaceTime and, those type of calls still work better from iPhone to iPhone. But now with iOS 15, we do have the ability of FaceTiming on Androids. So now we can go ahead and send Android users a link through Google Message, through iMessage, and they can accept it through Google Message and it'll work as well. Another big thing between both that I really want to hit on is actually with updates. So the iMessage application is not on the App Store. Google Messages is on the Play Store. So you can actually go to the Play Store. If there's an update available, you can go ahead and get the update without having to update your whole entire phone over and over again. With iMessage, I think they may have the app on, the App Store, but you can't really download or update your, iMessage application that way. You have to go ahead and update your phone. So for example, if iOS 15.5.3 brings a cool iMessage update, you will have to go ahead and update your phone to that version of software. And let's say there was a massive issue with iMessage, you're going to have to update your whole phone to fix that issue. With Google Messages, that's not really the case. You can go ahead and update your phone and that will get you the latest update, but you can also go into the Play Store and update the application that way as well. So that is a really cool thing that I like about that. And without a doubt, that's probably one of my favorite things about it for sure. Now, I will say the updates are good and bad. Anytime I make my way over to my, the reviews of Google Message, I do see a lot of complaints about, the updates and how certain updates are causing some issues and it worked before and now it doesn't work. But I will say that kind of happens with every update for most applications. And I'm sure if iMessage had a review system like that too, I'm sure there would be a lot of complaints like that as well. So now we come down to somewhat of a verdict. And as you guys can tell, there's a lot of similarities. I will say like 99% of the functionality between these two, there's just like pretty much the same thing. It really just depends on whether you have an Android or iPhone. But I do think, my personal opinion, I would love to have kind of like a mush between these two. I love the functionality and just the community and just the involvement that iMessage has that I can get from other people. I can just see everything working itself out, which is so awesome. But also Google Messages, when you're chatting from one Google Message user to another Google Message user, it's almost the exact same experience. And I do feel like there's more features added with something like Google Message by having Google Assistant built in, by getting, the new reactions that we have now, which we didn't really have before. We also have built-in spam protection in Messages as well, which is really cool. And you still have a lot of the same functionality between the two. You can message people on your phone, you can message people on your computer using your account. So it's not, and even if you have a smartwatch, you can go and use Google Messages there too. So it's not really as big of a difference as it used to be. I think back in like 2015, 2014, there were massive differences and everybody was like, iMessage is the best, this and that. But I do feel like now that Samsung is starting to include Google Messages on a lot of their phones. And to be honest, now that Google Messages has gotten reactions and they've gotten a lot of updates in that sense, I feel like we're kind of getting into a point where Google Messages is kind of its own thing and iMessage is kind of its own thing. There used to be a kind of like a bland statement where people would say, oh, I want iMessage on Androids, I want iMessage on Androids. But I feel like now that Google Messages has gotten better, I kind of think these two things can kind of coexist. And I feel like in the next few years, we're probably going to end up getting iMessage and Google Messages. If Google Messages ends up becoming super, super popular, which it already is, I'm sure it's probably going to end up working nicely with iMessage some form or fashion. So I would love to hear your opinion on this. Let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.